He hired a penniless waitress to pose as his fiancée, but she ended up owning his heart? Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us return to our main character. It was a late evening in New York City. Rain drizzled down the tall glass windows of a five-star hotel, where a charity gala was in full swing. Inside, men in tailored suits and women in glittering gowns clinked champagne glasses, laughing under the golden chandeliers. Yet, at the farthest corner of the grand ballroom, a young woman in a plain black waitress uniform balanced a tray of hors d'oeuvres with trembling hands. Her name was Emily Carter. She had grown up in a small town in Pennsylvania, where dreams were often too expensive to chase. Life had forced her to work two jobs, one at the cafe during the day, and another as a waitress at night to pay for her younger brother's school fees and her mother's hospital bills. Her sneakers were worn thin, her hair tied back in a simple ponytail, but her eyes carried a quiet strength that refused to dim. As she moved between the crowd, she heard whispers. "She does not belong here," one woman muttered to her friend. Another smirked. "Look at her shoes. Definitely not designer." Emily kept her head down, gripping the tray tighter, praying the night would end soon. Across the room, Alexander Knight watched everything. He was the kind of man who drew attention without trying. Tall, broad-shouldered, with sharp gray eyes that seemed to see straight through lies. He was the heir to the Knight Corporation, one of the largest real estate empires in America. Tonight, though, his jaw was tight, his patience thinner than the rim of his champagne glass. His mother had just announced to a circle of board members that her son would soon introduce his fiancée. It was a lie meant to calm their concerns about his bachelor lifestyle. Alexander knew he needed a solution, fast, before the board demanded proof. When his gaze landed on Emily, he noticed not her uniform, but the way she steadied an elderly guest's hand so he would not drop his glass. He saw how she lowered her head politely when insulted, but her eyes still glimmered with quiet defiance. She was poor, clearly. Yet there was something dignified about her presence. An idea struck him, bold, reckless, but strangely perfect. He excused himself from the conversation, walking straight toward her. Emily froze when she realized the most powerful man in the room was approaching. Her first thought was that she had done something wrong. She braced herself for reprimand. Instead, Alexander's voice was calm, low, and deliberate. "Miss, I need to speak with you. Right now." Emily blinked, confused. "Me, sir?" "Yes, you," he said firmly. "Follow me." He led her out of the ballroom and into a quiet hallway, where the sounds of laughter and music faded. Emily clutched her tray nervously. "If I did something wrong, I am so sorry. I really need this job. Please, do not fire me." Alexander studied her for a long moment, then spoke words she could never have expected. "I am not here to fire you. I am here to make you an offer. It may sound insane, but hear me out. I need someone to pose as my fiancée." Emily almost dropped the tray. Her mouth fell open in disbelief. "Your fiancée? You cannot be serious." "I am very serious," Alexander said, his gaze unwavering. "It will be temporary. You will be compensated generously, enough to cover your family's expenses and more. In return, you will attend events by my side and pretend we are engaged." Her heart raced. This was madness. A billionaire asking a penniless waitress to be his fiancée. The words felt like a cruel joke. She shook her head. "Why me? I am nobody. I do not even know how to act in your world." "That is exactly why," he replied softly, almost more to himself than to her. "Because you are real. Because you do not belong to their world of pretense." Emily's pulse thundered in her ears. Part of her wanted to run, to escape this impossible proposition. Yet another part, the one that remembered her mother's mounting hospital bills and her brother's tuition, whispered that maybe this was the miracle she had prayed for. She swallowed hard, staring into his gray eyes, knowing that the choice she made tonight would change her life forever. Emily could hardly believe the words that had just left Alexander Knight's lips. The echo of his offer still rang in her ears as she stood frozen in the quiet hallway outside the ballroom. For a long moment, she could not move. Her tray balanced awkwardly in her hands as if it were the only thing tethering her to reality. "I think you have mistaken me for someone else," she whispered at last, her voice trembling. "I am not a woman who belongs in your world. I serve food and clear empty glasses, that is all." Alexander's gray eyes did not waver. "You underestimate yourself. What I need is not another socialite trained to smile on cue. What I need is someone real, someone who can convince a boardroom full of skeptics that I have chosen a fiancé because of character, not status." I looked around that room tonight, and do you know who stood out? You did. Emily's throat tightened. His words sounded absurd, and yet there was something in his tone, an edge of sincerity that made her heartbeat stumble. She set the tray down on a narrow table against the wall, her palms clammy. "Even if I said yes, which I am not saying I would fail, I do not know the rules of your world. I do not know what fork to use at a dinner table set for 12 courses. I would embarrass you." A flicker of a smile touched his lips, though it was brief, almost reluctant. "Then I will teach you. Every step, every rule, every gesture. I will handle the press. I will handle the board. You will only need to stand by my side and let them believe in us." Emily shook her head, her mind spinning. The idea was madness. Yet his words painted an image that was dangerously tempting. She thought of her mother lying in a hospital bed, the bills stacked higher each month. She thought of her younger brother staring at a college acceptance letter he could not afford to use. "How long?" she asked softly. Alexander's eyes sharpened, sensing her shift. 3 months. Long enough to silence my critics, long enough to satisfy my mother. After that, you can walk away with more money than you ever thought possible. Enough to change your family's life. 3 months, 90 days. A season of pretending. Her chest rose and fell with uneven breaths. "And if someone finds out the truth, then they will have to go through me," he said without hesitation. The conviction in his voice startled her. For a man who had everything, he spoke as though he had already chosen to risk it all. Emily searched his face, looking for cruelty, for mockery, for any hint that this was a trick. But all she found was determination carved into the hard lines of his jaw. Her pulse hammered as the silence stretched between them. At last, she whispered, "What happens if I say no?" "Then nothing changes for me," Alexander answered evenly. "But everything stays the same for you. You go back to serving drinks, counting every dollar, drowning in debts that were never your fault." The words struck deep. He had seen straight through her, past her uniform, past her guarded eyes. For a moment, she hated him for it. And yet, she hated herself more for the way her resolve wavered. Emily wrapped her arms around herself, as if trying to shield her heart from the weight of the choice pressing down on her. "I need time to think," she managed. Alexander gave a single nod. "You have until tomorrow morning. If you decide yes, meet me in the hotel lobby at 8 o'clock sharp. If you decide no, then we never speak of this again." With that, he turned and walked away, his footsteps echoing down the marble hallway. Emily stood alone, staring at the empty space where he had been, her thoughts spinning faster than she could catch them. 3 months of pretending to be the fiancé of Alexander Knight. 3 months of deception, wrapped in silk gowns and flashing cameras. Could she survive such a bargain? Her fingers brushed against the thin fabric of her uniform, the faint scent of spilled champagne clinging to her sleeve. She thought of her mother, her brother, her family's fragile hope, and for the first time in her life, Emily Carter considered that perhaps the most impossible choice might be the only way forward. The following morning, Emily Carter sat on the edge of her narrow bed in her small apartment, staring at the alarm clock that read 7:30. She had not slept more than a few restless hours. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Alexander Knight's face, calm and unyielding, offering her a bargain that could change her life. Her mother's fragile voice echoed in her mind from the night before. "Do not worry about me, sweetheart. We will find a way." But Emily knew there was no way. The hospital had called again, demanding another payment. Her younger brother had texted, hiding his disappointment, telling her he could defer college for another year. She had swallowed her tears, promising him things would be better. And now, unbelievably, the answer to those prayers waited in the lobby of a 5-star hotel. At 7:55, Emily walked into the grand lobby. Her waitress uniform had been replaced with a plain but neat dress borrowed from a friend. It was not designer, but it was pressed and clean. She clutched her worn purse tightly, her heart pounding with every step. Alexander was already there, standing by the marble staircase as though he had been carved from it. His gray eyes swept over her, assessing. "You came," he said simply. Emily nodded, though her throat was dry. "I came, but I need to make something clear. I am agreeing to this for my family, that is all." Whoa! A shadow of something unreadable flickered across his face, but he only replied, "Understood. Then let us begin." What followed felt like stepping into a whirlwind. Within hours, Emily found herself seated in the back of a sleek black town car, driving through the streets of New York City beside Alexander. He spoke of schedules, of luncheons and charity events, of the expectations placed upon them. He laid out rules with military precision: how she should address board members, how she should smile for photographers, what stories she should tell if asked about their engagement. Her head spun, but she wrote everything down in a small notebook, determined not to fail. That evening, Alexander brought her to his family's estate on the outskirts of the city. The mansion loomed like something out of a dream, all white stone pillars and manicured lawns. Emily's breath caught as the car rolled up the driveway, the fountain sparkling in the late afternoon light. She had never set foot in such a place. Inside, the walls were lined with oil paintings and marble busts. Chandeliers glittered overhead. A maid offered to take Emily's coat, but she clutched it tightly, her fingers trembling. She felt like an imposter, a girl from a small town pretending to belong in a palace. Alexander noticed, his voice quiet, as he leaned toward her. "Do not let them see your fear. Hold your head high. You are here because I chose you." Emily swallowed hard, forcing her shoulders back. The first test came quickly. At dinner, seated across from Alexander's elegantly dressed mother and several close family friends, Emily felt every eye on her. Silverware gleamed under the candlelight, 12 pieces arranged in a maze before her plate. She froze for a moment, unsure which fork to choose. A woman at the table, lips painted crimson, smirked. "Tell us, dear, where did you and Alexander meet? At an art auction in Paris? At a yacht party in the Hamptons?" Emily's chest tightened. She opened her mouth, searching for the rehearsed story Alexander had given her, but the words tangled. She glanced at him, panic rising. Alexander stepped in smoothly. "We met in the most unexpected of places," he said, his gaze never leaving Emily's face. "And that is why it means more to me than any gala or yacht. Sometimes fate does not wait for perfection." The table chuckled politely, though suspicion lingered in their eyes. Emily forced a small smile, her palms damp under the tablecloth. She had survived, but barely. Later that night, alone in the guest room Alexander had assigned her, Emily sat by the window overlooking the glowing city lights. Her notebook lay open on her lap, filled with scribbled rules and reminders. She whispered to herself, "I can do this. For 3 months, I can do this." But deep inside, she knew the greatest challenge was not the forks or the gowns or the endless eyes watching her. It was the man whose name she now carried, the man whose steady gaze stirred something inside her that was far more dangerous than any contract. The days that followed felt like stepping into a storm that never rested. Emily Carter rose early each morning in the night estate, her notebook always in hand, memorizing Alexander's instructions. Every day there were lessons in posture, diction, and etiquette. She practiced how to hold a wine glass, how to nod gracefully without seeming submissive, how to smile in a way that looked effortless even when her nerves quivered. Alexander remained patient, though his patience often sounded more like commands. Chin up, shoulders straight. No fidgeting with your hands. When someone insults you, you do not flinch. You smile and you let them drown in their own pettiness. Emily tried. She stumbled often, mispronounced the name of a French vineyard, or forgot to switch forks between courses. But each time she faltered, she remembered her mother's pale face in the hospital bed, her brother's hopeful eyes. That image steeled her, forcing her to press forward no matter how humiliated she felt. Then came the charity banquet. It was held at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, an evening designed to impress New York's wealthiest and most critical elite. The grand hall shimmered with golden light, violinists playing in the corner, waiters circulating with trays of champagne. Emily stood at Alexander's side, dressed in a borrowed gown the color of midnight, her hair styled by a professional for the first time in her life. From across the room, whispers began. She is very young. I have never seen her before. Night must be desperate. Emily's heart pounded. She clutched her clutch so tightly her knuckles turned white. A man in his 50s, broad-shouldered and smug, approached them with a smirk. Alexander, he said, introduce us to this mystery fiancée of yours. She seems unpolished. Emily's stomach dropped. She knew her face was flushing, but before she could respond, Alexander placed a hand lightly on her back. This is Emily Carter, he said firmly. She has more grace in her little finger than most people have in their entire body. The man's smirk faltered under Alexander's sharp tone, but he did not back down. He raised his glass, saying, Grace, perhaps. But can she keep up with us? A toast followed, and soon Emily found herself surrounded by probing questions. Where had she studied? Who were her parents? What charities did she support? Each question felt like a dagger aimed at exposing her truth. Her mind blanked, and panic threatened to overwhelm her. Then she remembered Alexander's advice. Do not flinch. Smile. So she smiled, her voice steady, though her palms were damp. I grew up in a small town where people believed in hard work more than titles. I may not have studied in Paris or London, but I know the value of honesty and loyalty. And those are qualities that never go out of style. The circle grew quiet. The smug man blinked, clearly unprepared for such a response. A few women even nodded, impressed despite themselves. Alexander's eyes flickered with something new: approval, pride, perhaps even admiration. But the night was not over. As dinner was served, the rival businessman made a cruel move. He lifted his glass and asked Emily to make a toast worthy of the Knight family name. It was a trap designed to humiliate her before the entire room. Emily stood, her knees trembling beneath the tablecloth. Dozens of eyes turned toward her. She inhaled slowly, her voice ringing clear. To family, she said. Not just the one we are born into, but the one we choose. May we all remember that wealth means nothing without love, and titles mean nothing without honor. The hall erupted in polite applause, and Alexander's hand brushed hers under the table in a silent gesture of support. Later, when the evening ended, and the car doors closed behind them, Emily let out the breath she had been holding all night. I thought I would faint, she admitted, her laugh shaky. Alexander studied her, the faintest smile tugging at his lips. You were extraordinary. For the first time since this charade began, Emily allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, she could survive 3 months in Alexander Knight's world. What she did not realize yet was that survival would not be her greatest challenge. The real challenge would be guarding her heart. In the weeks that followed the banquet at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, Emily Carter's life changed at a dizzying pace. Each day was a lesson, each night a test. Alexander Knight's world was ruthless, filled with watchful eyes and whispered judgments. Yet she found herself adapting in ways she never thought possible. What unsettled her most was not the scrutiny of strangers, but the quiet shifts she began to notice in Alexander himself. One evening, after a long day of public appearances, they returned to the Knight estate. Emily slipped off her heels the moment she entered her guest room, her feet sore and her body aching. She had just sat down by the vanity when a soft knock came at the door. She hesitated before answering. Come in. Alexander stepped inside, his tie loosened, his usual composure softened by exhaustion. He studied her for a long moment, then said, You handled yourself well tonight. The board members were convinced. I could see it in their faces. Emily looked down, brushing a loose strand of hair behind her ear. I almost slipped when Mrs. Donovan asked about our wedding plans. I did not know what to say. You did not slip, he corrected gently. You laughed. And you turned it into charm. That was quick thinking. Silence stretched between them. Emily's heart thudded against her ribs. She realized she was waiting, almost hoping, for more than just compliments about her performance. Alexander took a step closer. Emily, I need you to understand something. This arrangement was meant to be strategic, nothing more. But lately, he paused, as if choosing his words carefully. Lately, I find myself forgetting it is only an arrangement. Her breath caught. The walls she had built around her heart wavered. She forced herself to smile lightly, trying to hide the tremor in her voice. Careful, Mr. Knight. You are starting to sound almost human. His lips curved into the faintest smile. Do not tell anyone. It might ruin my reputation. The air between them grew heavy, charged with something unspoken. For the first time, Emily saw not the cold billionaire but a man who carried weight on his shoulders. A man who allowed himself a rare moment of vulnerability. The days that followed only deepened the shift. Alexander began to notice the smallest things when Emily skipped meals because she was too nervous. When she stood shivering in the cold during a photo shoot, when she looked longingly at the city streets as if she missed her old life. He started leaving a cup of coffee on her desk in the mornings, her favorite blend with just the right amount of sugar. He offered her his coat one evening without a word, when the wind cut sharp against her skin. These gestures, simple as they were, unsettled Emily far more than the harsh comments of society. Because they were not part of the contract, they were not rehearsed, they were real. One night, after another gala where she had smiled until her cheeks ached, Emily found herself alone with Alexander in the car. The city lights flickered past the tinted windows. Her voice was quiet, almost a whisper. Do you ever wonder what will happen after 3 months are over? Alexander's gaze lingered on her, his expression unreadable. At last, he said, Yes. I wonder every day. Emily turned away, staring out at the skyline. Her chest tightened with something she could not name. Fear, longing, maybe both. Because the truth was, she was beginning to dread the end of this bargain. And in that moment, she realized the most dangerous part of this contract was not the deception or the scrutiny. It was the possibility that when the 3 months ended, her heart might already belong to Alexander Knight. The turning point arrived without warning. Emily Carter had started to believe she could survive this strange arrangement, even with the weight of lies pressing against her chest. But the world Alexander Knight lived in had sharp edges, and one of those edges was about to cut deep. It began with whispers in the press. At first, they were small and almost dismissible questions about Emily's background, doubts about her sudden appearance in Alexander's life. Then, like a spark fanned into flame, the whispers grew into accusations. Headlines appeared in bold print. Who is Emily Carter? From waitress to heiress overnight. One morning, Emily awoke to find a glossy magazine slipped under her bedroom door at the estate. Her hands trembled as she turned the pages. There it was, her photograph, taken without her knowing, as she walked home in her waitress uniform weeks earlier. The caption cut like a knife. Knight's fiancée or Knight's scandal? Her stomach dropped. Someone had uncovered the truth. At breakfast, the atmosphere was suffocating. Alexander sat at the head of the table, his expression hard, unreadable. His mother's voice was sharp with fury. This girl is a fraud, Alexander. A waitress pretending to be a socialite? Do you understand what this could do to our reputation? Emily wanted to speak, to defend herself, but her throat closed. Every word she could think of sounded like an excuse. Alexander did not answer immediately. His jaw tightened, his eyes fixed on Emily, but his silence cut deeper than any accusation. The betrayal burned. Did he believe the lies? Did he think she had schemed her way into his life for money? She pushed back her chair, the scrape loud against the marble floor. I never asked for this, she said, her voice shaking. I never lied about who I was. You brought me here. You made me play this role. And now you sit there and say nothing? Her eyes blurred with tears as she fled the room. Outside, the winter wind bit through her coat as she walked down the long driveway of the estate. She had nowhere to go, no plan. Only the crushing weight of humiliation pressing down on her chest. The photographers camped near the gates shouted her name, their cameras flashing like lightning. Emily lifted her chin and kept walking, though each step felt like walking through fire. That night, alone in her tiny apartment once more, she sat on the floor clutching her notebook of lessons. The pages that once held hope now felt like shackles. She whispered to herself, it was all pretend, none of it was real. But her heart knew otherwise. The way Alexander had looked at her, the quiet gestures of kindness, the fleeting vulnerability, Those moments had not been part of the contract. Still, the damage was done. The world saw her as a liar, and Alexander's silence had condemned her more than any headline ever could. Meanwhile, in the night estate, Alexander stood alone in his office, staring at the city skyline through the glass. His hands curled into fists. He knew exactly who was behind the leak, an old rival determined to see him fall. But what hurt more than the betrayal of business was the look on Emily's face when she believed he doubted her. For the first time, Alexander Knight realized he was not just fighting for his company's reputation. He was fighting for something far more fragile, Emily's trust, and perhaps even her love. But as he picked up the phone to call his investigators, he wondered if it was already too late. The days that followed were heavy with silence. Emily Carter returned to her modest apartment, shutting out the world that had chewed her up and spat her out. The tabloids continued their frenzy, painting her as a schemer, a gold digger who had tricked Alexander Knight into a sham engagement. Each headline felt like another stone added to the weight crushing her chest. She went back to long shifts at the cafe, blending into the background, hoping no one would recognize her. But they did. Customers whispered, some smirked, others stared with cruel curiosity. Emily kept her head down, her pride in tatters. Meanwhile, Alexander fought a different battle. He had uncovered proof that the leak had been orchestrated by his rival, a man desperate to weaken him before an upcoming merger. The photographs, the twisted storylines, all of it had been staged. Yet exposing the truth to the world would not be enough. He needed to face Emily, to tell her what he had learned, and more importantly, to tell her what she had come to mean to him. Late one evening, he appeared at the cafe. Emily was wiping down tables when the door chimed. Her breath caught the moment she saw him standing there, his presence filling the small room. She stiffened, her voice low. "You should not be here. People will talk." "Oh? Let them," Alexander replied, his tone steady, but his eyes carrying something softer, almost pleading. "Emily, I know what happened. I know you were set up. You never lied to me. You never played me. The fault was mine for staying silent when you needed me to speak." Her hands gripped the rag tightly, her knuckles white. "Your silence said everything, Alexander. It told me that you believed them. That deep down, you thought I was nothing but a waitress grasping for your money." "No?" His jaw tightened, but his voice did not waver. "I thought I was protecting you, but I see now I only hurt you more. Emily, I made a mistake. I let my pride and my fear control me. But I will not let this be the end." The cafe was empty, the hum of the refrigerator, the only sound between them. Emily looked at him, her eyes clouded with hurt and disbelief. Part of her wanted to believe him, to let her heart surrender. But the pain of betrayal was still raw. "I do not know if I can trust you again," she whispered. Alexander stepped closer, his voice low, resolute. "Then let me earn it. Not with promises, not with contracts, but with actions. Give me the chance to prove that I choose you not because of what the world thinks, but because of who you are." For a long moment, Emily said nothing. She turned away, staring at the dim lights outside the window. Her heart warred with her mind, torn between fear and longing. Finally, she spoke, her voice fragile. "You want a chance? Then fight for it. Show me that you mean every word." Alexander's gray eyes locked on hers, burning with determination. "I will. I swear it." And in that quiet cafe, the battle lines were drawn not against rivals or tabloids, but for something far greater, for love and for redemption. The showdown came sooner than Emily Carter expected. Within a week, Alexander Knight called a press conference in the grand hall of his company's headquarters. Every major news outlet was present, cameras flashing, microphones crowding the podium. The world was eager for blood, ready to watch a billionaire fall, and the young woman by his side be destroyed. Emily stood at the edge of the stage, her heart hammering in her chest. She had agreed to come, though every step inside the building had felt like walking into a fire. She wore no diamonds, no extravagant gown, only a simple navy dress that reflected who she truly was. For the first time, she wanted no disguise. Alexander stepped forward, tall and commanding, his presence filling the room. The noise of the reporters quieted as his voice carried through the hall. "For weeks, there have been rumors and lies about the woman I love. They say she tricked me, that she is not worthy of standing by my side. Let me be clear. Emily Carter is my fiancée. Not because of a contract, not because of appearances, but because of her heart. She is honest, brave, and more real than anyone else in this room. The crowd erupted with questions, shouts, and camera flashes. A rival businessman, the very man who had orchestrated the scandal, rose from his seat and sneered. So you admit it? She was a waitress. She is nothing but a poor girl plucked off the street to make you look respectable. Alexander's jaw tightened, but his voice remained firm. Yes, she was a waitress. She worked 2 jobs to support her family. She carried more strength and integrity than the entire board of directors combined, and that is exactly why I love her. The rival paled, his trap backfiring. Murmurs spread through the room. Some critical, others supportive. Then, to everyone's shock, Emily stepped forward. Her voice trembled at first, but grew steady as she spoke into the sea of microphones. I did not come here to deceive anyone. I never asked for this life, but I will not apologize for who I am. I am Emily Carter, and I am not ashamed of my past. If being a waitress disqualifies me from love in your eyes, then so be it. But love does not bow to money or power. Love is earned in honesty, in kindness, in sacrifice. The hall went silent. Cameras clicked furiously, capturing every word, every tear that threatened to fall but did not. Alexander reached for her hand, lacing his fingers through hers, lifting them for the world to see. This is the woman I choose. If anyone has a problem with that, they can take it up with me. The moment became a storm of voices, but Emily felt strangely calm. For the first time, she was not hiding, not pretending. She was standing in the truth, her truth, and Alexander was standing there with her. It was the highest point of tension, the pinnacle of risk. Yet deep in her heart, Emily knew they had already won. Not against the press, not against rivals, but against the walls that had once kept them apart. When the press conference ended, Emily Carter and Alexander Knight walked out of the building hand in hand, the flashing cameras still following them. But the fear inside, Emily had finally begun to fade. She had spoken her truth, and Alexander had chosen to stand beside her openly, without hesitation. The lies had been shattered, and though the world might still judge them, they had faced the storm together. In the days that followed, the frenzy of headlines began to quiet. Some outlets continued their gossip, but others shifted their tone, praising Emily's courage and Alexander's honesty. The Knight Corporation stabilized, the rivals' smear campaign collapsed, and business moved forward. But for Emily, none of that mattered as much as the change she felt in her own heart. She was no longer pretending. At the estate, life was different. Emily no longer walked with her head down, no longer flinched at the whispers of servants or the sharp eyes of Alexander's family. She carried herself with quiet dignity, knowing she had earned her place, not through money or a contract, but through her own strength. One evening, Alexander brought her to the terrace overlooking the city skyline. The air was cool, the lights below twinkling like a field of stars. He turned to her, his expression serious yet tender. Emily, when I first asked you to stand by my side, it was a deal. But every moment since then has shown me that this is not business. This is not strategy, this is love. And I cannot imagine a future without you in it. Emily's breath caught, her heart swelling with emotions she had tried so long to contain. Alexander, I came into this thinking I was only filling a role. But somewhere along the way, you became more than the man who hired me. You became the man who saw me when no one else did. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a velvet box. Inside was not the gaudy diamond one might expect from a billionaire, but a ring of simple beauty, a single stone, elegant and timeless. This time, no contracts, no conditions. Emily Carter, will you marry me for real? Tears blurred her vision, but her voice was steady. Yes. 1,000 times yes. Oh. Alexander slipped the ring onto her finger and pulled her into his arms. For the first time, Emily did not feel like a stranger in his world. She felt like she belonged, not because of wealth, but because love had claimed its rightful place. Their story had begun with a lie, with a contract meant to deceive. But it ended with truth, with a love that had been tested by fire and proven unbreakable. And as Emily leaned into Alexander beneath the night sky, she knew this was not the end of her story. It was the beginning of a new one built not on pretense, but on the simple, powerful truth that love does not measure status. Love measures the heart.